Everybody is writing and talking about the book of Revelation these days. But I have to tell you, they're not speaking intelligently about the book of Revelation. Our guest today does, in fact, speak on the basis of many years of research, the leading of the Lord, and I'm talking about author and lecturer Bill Salus. Bill, welcome to Prophecy Watchers.
Gary, thanks. It's good to be back on the program.
And you and I have noted that Revelation is in the news today. Everybody's talking about the apocalypse, the coming horrific period of time. And yet, when we as Christians look at the book of Revelation, we get something entirely different out of it. And I want to go back a few years as we talk about the book of Revelation to your first book, starting in 2011, and it was called Revelation Road. And let's just begin with Revelation Road. Explain to people what you were trying to convey in this book.
It's one thing to talk about Bible prophecies. It's another thing to see how they would actually affect a family that experiences them. And so Revelation Road is actually two books in one, Gary. It's a novel that's easy to read. We contracted a novelist to assist me with making sure it was easy to read. And it also explains the prophecies in the novel. In other words, as a novel, there's certain author liberties you can take to paint the story. So unlike the Left Behind series, which was a well-read series,
Sure.
This actually has a commentary section as well. We call it a companion's commentary. So as the reader goes through one chapter of the novel, he or she can go through and say, well, why did Bill say what he said in the novel? What are the prophecies related? So we give them a biblical commentary. It's two books in one. And, it's just, my goal is to chronologically order the events of prophecies between now and the second coming of Christ. And of course, there's just too many to put into one book. So we've devised a series. It'll probably end up being a trilogy. We're just issuing book 2 now. Revelation Road it was written in 2011, came out in 2012. And as you were saying, and as you opened this program, everything is starting to converge right now. And that's why this receptivity level, this intensity is coming up where people are, there's more apocalyptic movies out now.
Oh, yeah.
Matter of fact, there's been several apocalyptic movies written since I wrote Revelation Road. That they're different than this one. This one actually came out before some of them. But, there's a fervor right now because of what's going on in the world.
Well, there's no hope in the apocalyptic movies. And I've seen the trailers for a lot of them. I don't usually go to them, the ghost and monster genre of movies, or World War, or the volcanic eruptions, or tidal waves, or whatever the theme happens to be. The last book in the Bible is called the Apocalypse of John, and that translates into English as Revelation. And from the Christian perspective, there is so much hope and so much uplift in the book of Revelation. It is not a condemning thing. It does not drive you to despair to read the book of Revelation, because God provides a way out for those who believe in him. And that's really at the heart of what you're writing about.
Absolutely. Matter of fact, the subtitle to the Revelation Road book is Hope Beyond the Horizon. The concerns we're seeing coming upon humanity, we're being thrust into a period of time of which the Bible has more to say about than any other period of time. I'm quoting Chuck Missler there, a guest you've had before. The point is, the final generation has more said about it than even when Jesus Christ walked on the earth. And this is not a book about Christian zombies and zombie apocalypses. This is a family, grandparents who believe their grandson, their grandchildren have been birthed into the final generation, and they're trying to prepare them for the troubling events that are about to happen. And so this book is very important so we can say, look, this stuff is about to happen. These prophecies that are covered in Revelation Road could happen at the present time. They could happen now. And so therefore, how will they happen, and how will you be prepared for them when they come, roll off the parchments and hit the pavement?
Now let's go back to the beginning. And I want Bill to explain to you how Revelation Road really started, and how you prayed about this and how your prayer was answered.
Yes, Gary, it was a pivotal time in my ministry. I had gone full-time ministry from my business before. I believe it was that time the Lord chose me to go do that. And I was praying late one night, wanting to make sure that, Lord, I made the right decision to go full-time. It was a Sunday night, about 3 a.m. I'm praying fervently. And I said, Lord, I've got a book swimming around in my head. I want to outline all the events that are going to happen. People want to know how things are going to happen, how to prepare for them. And so put these things into a chronological order and make a long story short. Gary, the very next morning, I get a call from a wonderful couple, a man and a wife. They commissioned me to write this book. And that happened in answer to prayer the day after I prayed. And so the Lord answers prayers in his own time, and sometimes that can be real swiftly. And thankfully, I said, okay, you want me to write this book? You want me to go full-time? And that really is what sprung me into full-time ministry confidently.
Now, you have, I guess, graduated into another series of prophetic expositions following Revelation Road. You took a little detour for a while. Psalm 83, for example, which I think opened a whole field of discussion when you talked about Psalm 83 as a prophetic psalm. And so for a while, you kind of detoured off of Revelation Road. Let's talk about that period.
Well, it's interesting because, I initially had written a book called Israelistine. And that book has been updated with the Psalm 83 book that you were just talking about. Before I wrote the Psalm 83 book, I wrote Revelation Road. I felt that let's put this into a story and let's lay out these prophecies through a series of books. In 2012, after Revelation Road was written, I actually wrote Apocalypse Road, which is book 2, the one we'll be talking about here, with a lot of interesting things that happen after the events of Revelation Road, carrying the family on through the story of the end times. And it was in the process, we kind of decided this book is a little bit ahead of its time, Apocalypse Road. We need to unpack a few more things in Revelation Road with more detail until the signs of the times are converging more and the receptivity of the readership is at a level where they're really ready to tackle this stuff that you're going to write in Apocalypse Road. Fascinating information that is important to talk about in the end times that has been vastly overlooked. So like you said, the first thing along the line was, well, let's update. The Arab Spring was going on. Let's update the Psalm 83 things. There were a lot of objections. Is it really a prophecy? Does it really set the stage for Ezekiel 38?
Right.
Is the concluding Arab-Israeli war? Has it been fulfilled? We addressed all those in the Psalm 83 book, and that was very important. And then we started thinking, well, if we're going to outlay everything chronologically, we've got to make sure we've caught every potential prophecy out there. Has there been anything else vastly overlooked? And sure enough, we find that Jeremiah 49, verses 34 through 39, is talking about a prophecy dealing with Elam, which is dealing with Iran, which seems to have nuclear implications. So we wrote the book Nuclear Showdown in Iran, revealing this ancient prophecy of Elam. So that was during this window period between now to 2011 and 2012. We wrote Psalm 83, and then we found Jeremiah 49, Elam, and then another book had to be out. No longer will we just talk about prophecies. The prophecies we've written in Revelation Road could happen at the present time. There's no more preconditions. So we wrote the Now Prophecies book, which you folks have offered here. And I think it was one of your best sellers.
Oh, yeah, it was. The Now Prophecies continues to be a bestseller because, let's face it, the word now attracts attention. And you and I both believe that we're seeing some extremely important events unfolding at the moment in terms of Bible prophecy. We're seeing events in the Middle East, but we've been seeing those for a long time. Now we're ranging up into Ukraine and over into Turkey and Europe, and the general breakdown of political stability throughout the world. And I think everybody, Bill, is starting to look up and say, we can't be very far away from something big.
And that's why Apocalypse Road needs to come out now, Gary, because all the signs are converging. One of the reasons we believe we're deep into the end times is because all the end times are converging. For the longest time, we thought, well, when Israel became a nation in 1948, well, that's the tip-off that now the world hourglass has made its final spin into the end times. But the greater tip-off even now, because that was, over 6 decades ago, is that everything is just piling on, and one prophecy is about to happen, leading to another, to another, to another. It won't be another 6 decades until we see these prophecies coming, and when they start coming, they'll come in rapid succession.
Now back to Revelation Road for just a moment. The setting here is grandparents thinking about their grandchildren. And the idea is, what am I going to do if all this looms in somewhere in the near future? What about my kids? What about my grandchildren? Well, that's become even more important as a theme right now. I know people, I know many, many Christians right now who are worried about what's going to happen to their kids. And these are people who believe in the view of eschatology that you and I believe in. And naturally, they would be worried about their kids, some of whom have gone off to college and sort of walked away from the Lord, and they're saying, will my kid have another chance? Will my kid have a chance? Should I go in the rapture and my child or grandchild doesn't? Will that child or grandchild have an opportunity to receive Christ? And these are legitimate theological questions. And you have dived right into the heart of this series of questions.
Well, we really have. You're absolutely right. And that's why the easy reading novel is so important, because you actually put those grandparents and those people who are concerned about their loved young ones, grandkids and children, into the shoes of the characters. And you provide them the hope and understanding, okay, look, these kind of prophecies are going to come and happen, and here's how they're going to affect the world, and here's how you can respond to that. And so we cover those various prophecies leading up to the actual rapture. We get through Psalm 83, we get through nuclear showdown, what happens in Iran, we get through the destruction of Damascus, and we see how the stage gets set for the Ezekiel 38 invasion as we carry into Apocalypse Road book, and then the book concludes with the rapture. And I hate to give away the end of the story, but I will tell you this, when they read that last chapter in the Revelation Road novel, they will need a box of Kleenex close by. It's a very touching situation, because now people get left behind. And now what we pick up with right now is, do those people who get left behind have a second chance to make a choice toward Christ? Well, yes, people are getting saved after the rapture all over the place, but there are some teachers out there right now who say, if you've heard the gospel before the rapture, and you did not make your decision for Christ and become saved, thus now you did not get raptured, you've been left behind because you remained an unbeliever. Some people actually teach, according to what I believe is erroneous teaching in 2 Thessalonians 2, that they don't have a second chance at salvation. And that troubles many of probably your viewers that may have heard that teaching. And I put 7 reasons in Apocalypse Road, the second book, as to why that is just erroneous teaching. There are 7 reasons why you do have a second chance.
And we'll talk about those 7 reasons in a bit, but what interests me right now is what a lot of people are saying, and you've heard this, you'll continue to hear it, and that is that if the tribulation comes in the very, very near future, we're all going to go into it together. And at some point after that, then the rapture will take place. So all Christians are going to have to experience some form of tribulation. Some Christians might go 3/4 of the way through. Some might go through all the way to the end. There are various opinions, but your research has dealt with the period of time following the rapture and moving forward to the beginning of the tribulation. And you're looking at a gap there. You're looking at a period of time. Now, very few people have done this as systematically as you have, and this is what I find really interesting.
And this is why we've waited until now to bring this research out forward. It required a lot of research. We had to look at that gap. Before I talk about that gap, I do want to say this about the rapture. Since there's a commentary that goes with the novel aspect of these books, and Revelation Road concludes with the rapture, I devote a section of commentary to why the rapture is a pre-trib event. I give many reasons, many examples and stuff like that. I know a lot of the viewers, I'm going to speak to you directly, I know a lot of you are wondering about that. Do we escape the wrath of God that's going to come in the tribulation period? And yes, we do. We're told that in numerous places. And I list those scriptures in Revelation Road, and I talk about the other evidences that the church is not here during the tribulation period. So therefore, Gary, we're swinging back now to what you're talking about. So therefore, what happens when the tribulation period starts, that 7-year tribulation period, also known as Daniel's 70th week, it is not triggered by the rapture of the church. That the rapture of the church does not start the 7-year time clock of the tribulation period. It's the confirmation of a false covenant in Daniel 9:27 that actually gets that 7-year clock ticking. So therefore, you've got a rapture. You have a period of time between the rapture and the confirmation of the false covenant. I call it the post-rapture. It happens after the rapture, but it's a pre-trib period because it's before the tribulation. So post-rapture, pre-trib, gap. There's a gap there. Now, the question is, how long is that gap? If that gap is extended for more than a day, week, or a month, then you might suspect that there's some powerful events that are going to take place in that, because at that point after the supernatural rapture, the paranormal becomes the new normal. And scientific answers as to what happened are not going to satisfy the concerns of what's going on with the people, with the uncertain futures that are left behind.
Well, Bill, you know, and I know that for many, many years, perhaps 10, 15, maybe more years, a few Christian researchers have suggested that there would be some kind of a little pause or a gap between the rapture and the beginning of the tribulation. Some suggested maybe it would be a year. Some as long as maybe 3.5 years, and that's in print from many years ago. But it was not considered to be an important idea. It sort of rested in the background.
That's right.
But now I think the idea is becoming important.
Well, the reason it's important, Gary, right now is that the Bible speaks of a final generation. And we talked about this in the beginning. There's been more said in the Bible for that generation than any other generation that lived. And that information is God's gift to that generation. And that generation could be this generation, meaning the people who will get left behind and go through this post-rapture, pre-tribulation gap. Many of them could be alive right now. Matter of fact, many of them could be in your family, dear viewer, someone in your sphere of life, your workplace, your friends, your family. And that's why we want to speak to them. We're going to provide the book, Now Apocalypse Road, which will talk about the events that they will experience. They're not going to jump right into the tribulation period. We're going to show them why there's a little bit of time here in the middle and why there's certain things they should be on the lookout for. And by the way, those are big, big perilous events. The tribulation events are even worse, but we're building up with terrible events in the gap period, which means this book is an instruction manual for them then, but it's an instruction manual for you now, how to get them so they don't want to be involved after the rapture. They want to get raptured with you. So it's going to give you extra evidence and reasons how you can show them logically that this is an important time right now to accept Christ during the church age, because the events the Bible predicts that follows are perilous, and you, because of your love for them, you don't want them to go through it.
Yeah, and as you're talking, I have right here on the table in front of me a few things that Bill has put out. Here's a DVD called The Now Prophecies, America and the Coming Mideast Wars, Psalm 83, in which he talks about the prophecy implicit in that psalm. But the one that just caught my eye as you were talking is nuclear showdown in Iran. Now, we're talking about something that is imminent. We're talking about something that, if it popped, and that nuclear reactor down there on the Persian Gulf could poison the waters. I mean, a lot of possibilities. And the Iranians now have long-range rockets. They're developing ICBMs with our financial help, I might add. Let's talk about that just for a minute, to set the scene. What in the world is going on in the Middle East right now?
Right, and we do cover that in Revelation Road. And what you've got there is when you talk about the nuclear reactor in Bushehr by the Persian Gulf, that's exactly where Elam is territorially. And Jeremiah wrote, before Ezekiel wrote Ezekiel 38, that prophecy many of your viewers are aware of, that Gog and Magog invasion, and Iran's in that as Persia. Jeremiah actually wrote probably a decade before Ezekiel wrote that prophecy about Iran also, but dealing with Elam. And so this is why this book and DVD is so critical, because it actually has a prophecy that seems to find application in the current events that are going on with Iran's nuclear scenario right now, which cannot be trusted. And so basically at this point in time, I'm actually looking for that prophecy, probably be to the next prophecy to find fulfillment, and it's in that DVD.
But the rapture could take place before the nuclear showdown in Iran.
I'm glad you brought that up because I don't want to let you think that I think something has to happen before the rapture. The rapture is an imminent event. It could happen at the present time. And that's why right now is the critical time to redeem the time, because Jesus Christ is waiting for the command from his heavenly Father to come and get his bride, to fetch her, to go to those mansions he's preparing for her in John 14. And the moment the heavenly Father says, son, go get your bride, he will come instantly. It says, in the twinkling of an eye, not a split second will we stand between him and his union with you. However, we have today and today only to pay attention to what we need to be preparing for, because we don't know when he's coming. So we have to redeem the time, Gary.
You know, we're not going to have time on this program to fully exploit all of the ramifications of the Apocalypse Road scenario. But I do want to tell you that we've got another program coming after this. And what I want to do right now is look at something that Bill talks about in Isaiah chapter 28, verse 15. And in fact, it's verses 15 and 16 that are just so pertinent, and it's kind of one of those prophecies that somehow got shuffled to the back. Mm-hmm. But tell us how that figures into what you're writing about.
Right. Well, this is critical because we're talking about a gap. You know, ultimately, a tribulation period is going to come, and that tribulation period is going to come when the false covenant of Daniel 9:27 is confirmed. Right. However, that covenant was spoken about by Isaiah well over 100 years before Daniel gave us his details about who's going to help confirm it. It would be the Antichrist, and that it's for a 7-year period. Isaiah tells us more about this covenant, Gary, in Isaiah 28, verses 15 through 18.
And here's verse 15. It says, because you have said, and the you here is Israel, because you've said we've made a covenant with death and with hell, we're in agreement. When the overflowing scourge shall pass through, it shall not come unto us, for we've made lies our refuge, and under falsehood we've hidden ourselves. Wow, that's an indictment, but it suggests that Israel makes a covenant with the wrong people.
Right, and from the Lord's perspective, he's calling it death, and you're in agreement with Sheol. In other words, this agreement is right out of the pits of Hades itself. But they're willing to make an agreement with that because it says they're trying to avoid an overflowing scourge that is sweeping throughout the earth at the time. When we look, see, this covenant, what is that overflowing scourge? It has to be in existence for Israel to actually make a covenant. It can't be a fearful figment of Israel's imagination. So we have to look at what's going on in the world at the time this covenant is made. What's going on in that gap?
Right.
And that's what the Apocalypse Road is going to put a face on all that and explain that to people, because Israel's going to be wanting to have that temple, if it's not already built by that time, so that the Messiah will come, and whatever's going on in the world right now, they're going to think, well, whatever it takes for us to do what we need to do to get the Messiah to come, not realizing he's already come in Jesus Christ, we'll do that because it'll be politically expedient to hasten the first coming of Christ in their estimation, and he'll correct everything, and he'll issue the kingdom, which is the high point of Old Testament teaching and prophecies. And so they're willing to sign this covenant of falsehood with a real party. Death, you can't sign a covenant with intangibles like death and Hades, although God is calling them that. There is a real bona fide party that Israel covenants with, and so we put a face on who that party is and what that overflowing scourge is.
And by the way, this is Israel being spoken of here. It's not the church. Same thing in Daniel 9:27, where Israel makes a covenant with the man of sin there. And it's very clear from the context that he's not talking about a covenant between the church and the man of sin. He's talking about a covenant between Israel.
You and I have had this discussion. The church is not even on the earth at the time this covenant is confirmed. We are in Revelation 4 and 5, a picture with the 24 elders redeemed from among men, the tribes, tongues, and nations. John is caught up in Revelation 4. We believe this is a strong evidence that the church is already in heaven. And once the church is in heaven, Jesus Christ is opening a scroll with the sealed judgments and rolling out. First is Satan's point man, the Antichrist, we would commonly teach, comes out as a white horseman in Revelation 6 of the first seal. So now the guy in Daniel 9:27 who can confirm, and he confirms it. He would be like Bill Clinton confirmed a covenant between Egypt and, Jordan and Israel, and Jimmy Carter confirmed a covenant between Israel and Egypt. This guy's going to confirm a covenant. He's going to be Israel is going to trust him in a political position to confirm a covenant with some other party, and your people need to know who that other party is, and that's what Apocalypse Road will tell them.
Now, what's really fascinating to me, and we're going to go deeply into this on our next program with Bill, is that it takes time for prophetic events to develop. And this points to a period of some time between the rapture of the church and the developments we're talking about in the tribulation, or even prior to the tribulation. Well, I think you'll agree that Bill Salus has done a lot of thinking, and he's challenged us. He's challenged us to look at his material and to make up our own minds about that prophetic period that's just ahead. I want to tell you, by the way, that we're going to talk about the apocalypse too. With me is author, lecturer Bill Salus. Welcome to Prophecy Watchers.
Thanks, Gary. It's good to be back.
And the reason we're going to talk about the apocalypse is because of Bill's new book, Apocalypse Road. On our last broadcast with you, we talked about the history of Apocalypse Road, how it really started out some years ago as Revelation Road. Kind of fill us in, bring us up to date.
Yes, absolutely. In 2012, I released a book called Revelation Road, the book 1 in a series, and Apocalypse Road coming out now is book 2. And what these books are is a story of the events that can happen, the prophetic events chronologically from now until the second coming of Christ. And the goal was to order these things in a fashion where we could systematically understand how they're going to happen, put them into a novel so that people who like to read novels have an easy to understand novel, but also a commentary. So it's unlike the Left Behind series. It's both a novel and a commentary explaining why I'm saying what I'm saying inside the novel, dealing with grandparents who believe their grandchildren are in the final generation. They're very concerned about them. So certain prophecies in Revelation Road unfold, and this family has to face them. Psalm 83, the concluding Arab-Israeli war. The nuclear showdown in Iran, dealing with that ancient Elam prophecy in Jeremiah 49. Isaiah 17, the destruction of Damascus. Many of these prophecies, of course, your viewers are very familiar with these from prior programs. And ultimately, it concludes with the rapture. So what happens after the rapture, though? And that's what takes us into Apocalypse Road.
Now, Bill and I, in talking, and if you were with us in the last broadcast, we spoke about a kind of misunderstanding in Bible prophecy, that the rapture occurs is sort of like that fast, in the twinkling of an eye. Everybody thinks about the rapture as instantaneous, and in that same instant, just a millisecond later, the tribulation begins. And Bill, if you're thinking that way, it means that in your mind, you have to see all of the tribulation events ready to happen tomorrow before the rapture can happen today. Mm-hmm. And come to think of it, that clouds your thinking a great deal about the timeline that's involved.
Right, absolutely. And the point we made in the first program is that it's commonly become understood by a lot of our Bible prophecy teachers out there today that it's not the rapture that starts the 7-year tribulation period. It's the confirmation of the false covenant spoken about in Isaiah 28 and Daniel 9 verse 27. That's what starts the tribulation period. So the rapture happens, and an unspecified period of time occurs between the rapture until the Antichrist comes onto the scene in a level of where Israel will trust him to confirm a covenant, and Daniel 9:27, and then starts the tribulation period. So the question is that 24 hours, as some people teach, which I give reasons in Apocalypse Road why that's just not the case. Is that a week? Is that a month? Now, Gary, if it goes beyond a month, at a time after the rapture, where there's no more restraint on lawlessness and Satan's campaign of deception is in motion, when the paranormal becomes the normal, you can imagine there's a lot of powerful events happening in that gap period. I think the gap could be for a number of years.
And based on that thought, that let's call it a speculation, and then we begin by imagining that there is a period of time between the rapture and the beginning of the tribulation, and then we seek for the scriptures that point out or confirm that fact. And basically that's what you have done. And let's start with the idea of where we are today. Today, the world is unstable. Today, there's a lot of fear. There are people telling me you've got to prepare for the coming tribulation. You have to stock up on all kinds of things, and guns and ammo and food and what have you. You're getting ready for that which could happen like day after tomorrow. You could literally be in the tribulation period. And so with that kind of thinking, it creates an emotional, I think an emotional cloud, if you will, to the firm understanding of what Scripture actually says. Let's talk about salvation. Let's talk about families with their children, their grandchildren, aunts, uncles, cousins. You're a believer in Christ, and you're thinking about the rapture, and you're saying, oh my goodness, if I'm gone, I'd love to be gone tomorrow. I'd love for Jesus to come back, except for one thing. My family is lost. And what are you going to do at that point?
Right, and you're making some good points put into that whole section right there. There is a concern right now because they're seeing all these prophecies converge. People who have a respect for Bible prophecy and realize there's a last days and a final generation, and highly concerned that we're in those days and we're that final generation. And it's advisable to be prepared for events that can happen in the world, but it's also really important to realize that Jesus could come and take the believers out without warning. It's an imminent event, and that could happen at any given time. And the moment that happens, this gap period begins. If we're gone tonight, the gap's tomorrow. And so that's why we're trying to explain that what's going on. So now you have these parents that are concerned about their children. They're kind of the parents are at a fervor pitch because they're seeing all the things going on. They're seeing it starting to marry up with prophecies. Right. And they're concerned that their son or their daughter or some loved one, a family member, friend, who they've witnessed to, tried to explain the gospel to them, they're concerned that since they haven't received Christ, they are going to be left behind. And some people are even teaching, some of the Bible prophecy teachers are even teaching that those people who have heard about the gospel before the rapture, but did not receive Christ, therefore they get left behind, not taken up in the rapture, that they don't even have a second chance at salvation, because they think in 2 Thessalonians 2, it talks about the ones who love not the truth, they're perishing, and they're going to be given over to the lie, the strong deception that comes over and overtakes the earth.
As though it happens instantaneously.
Yeah, so now we've got this panic kind of going on in some of these households, like, well, do I prepare now? What do I do? This could happen tomorrow. What do I do about my son? He's not getting it. I'm concerned he's going to be left behind. And I hear some people saying he's not going to have a chance to be saved. He may as well get in line for the mark of the beast. I don't know what to do. Well, we're going to try to bring some clarity to you in this program and in this book, because you don't have to panic. People are getting saved after the rapture, and there is a second chance. And I give 7 reasons for that, Gary.
Yeah, and one of those reasons is you say that the rapture is an evangelistic event. Let's talk about that.
Right. Well, let's think about that. Let's assume that this parents we're talking about is sitting at a table when the rapture happens, having dinner with that child that they're concerned is not getting it, that's heard the gospel, and they're worried that he's going to be left behind. If all of a sudden the parents are gone, in that twinkling of an eye, that child right there is highly likely going to understand that was just the rapture, and what mom and dad were telling me clearly happened. Jesus Christ is the Messiah. Oh, I wish I would have accepted him beforehand. There's a pretty good chance that person is going to drop to their knees and accept Christ right now, especially if those parents said, look, if you are left behind, you receive Christ then the same way we're trying to tell you how to receive Christ now. It's through the gospel and giving your life to God. So there's a good chance that person's going to drop. Now, how many untold millions of people that may be left behind have heard the gospel beforehand? It only takes one of them to drop to their knees after the rapture to acknowledge that, hey, you have a second chance. You've heard the gospel. You've accepted Christ. And so it becomes an evangelizing tool. Wow, Jesus Christ just kept his promises to his believers. He came and got them, and he's taken them up to heaven, where he's been building those mansions in John 14.
Now, when we talk about this period of time, we're talking about the rapture, followed by a scene in heaven in the book of Revelation around the throne of God with 24 elders, and the opening of a sealed book. And those seals are opened one by one. The first seal reveals a man on a white horse with a bow. And what I'm working toward here is that after the church is in heaven, I think clearly shown in Revelation chapter 4, after the church is in heaven, then certain things begin to unfold, but apparently it takes some time to unfold these things. Talk about those seals, because you say that they're not all ripped open at one and the same time.
Right. In the book, I'm arguing for the possibility, and I think it's a strong possibility, and the arguments are good, that the seals, at least the first 5 of them, very well could begin in this gap period. I believe many of them will, of course, carry over into the tribulation period. Now, where there's a deviation there with what's commonly taught, Gary, is that a lot of the prophecy teachers believe that all the seal judgments fit into the tribulation period. And I'm going to show why I don't agree with that. Now,
and by the way, maybe I'll just interject here that you need to listen to this, because this is an extremely important point. There's been a way of looking at all those seals for years and years and years, going back 2-3 generations. And what you're about to say is kind of a new revelation. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, we understand that when the restraint is removed of lawlessness in 2 Thessalonians 2, that Satan will now forward his seed, his point man, the Antichrist, on the scene with all unrighteous deception, all power, signs, and lying wonders in 2 Thessalonians. So the first thing that happens when you have Jesus Christ opening the seal, the scroll, in Revelation chapter 5, where we're sitting there watching him do this, not on earth watching it, we're in heaven watching the scrolls open. The first thing that happens is the point man comes on the scene, the white horseman, the Antichrist. Okay, now you've got one integral party of the Daniel 9:27 on the scene, the Antichrist, who confirms the covenant between Israel and some other party. So we've got him on the scene, and then here comes, remember now, lawlessness is no longer being restrained. So what you now have is a second fiery red horseman, the second seal, and it says peace is taken from the earth, and wars are breaking out. So, Satan cannot control, when lawlessness is abounding, how people react to that. And wars are going to break out. It could be North Korea going after South Korea. It could be India and Pakistan. It could be nuclear weapons involved. And if Ezekiel 38 hasn't happened, it's likely to be right there, because that's a major war as well. Mm-hmm. And I believe that probably could fit in there. And some other scholars have agreed with that. Now, what happens in the aftermath of wars, you see in the third seal, the black horseman, that you now have pestilence and famines. And of course, these are the byproducts of a massive war. This is what's going to happen. But it says, don't harm the oil and the wine. So in other words, as we have to address the chaos that's going on and the problems that are going on in the aftermath of the war, we don't want to upset the driving engine of the world economy and that sort of thing, just to deal with those issues. And then here comes the fourth horseman, which is really critical. It says the pale horseman is death, and side saddling with it is Hades. And here's something that is going to really blow the teachers away, okay? Do you have Revelation 6 open? And can we read this to them about Revelation 6? I think it's verse 7 and 8, talking about how they're given authority over a quarter of the earth. And I want to explain what that probably means.
Well, you're talking about the fourth seal.
Fourth horseman of
and
the apocalypse.
The pale green horse that rides, the horse of death, this really evil, wicked horse. And verse 8 says, and I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell, or Hades, followed with him, and power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth to kill with a sword, with hunger, with death, and with the beasts of the earth. So I think the key phrase you're looking at there, and power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth. How do you interpret that?
Yeah, so with the setup the way it's been chronologically, here comes the Antichrist. He's going to start to try to rise to power, that political prowess that someday will get Israel to trust him to be able to confirm a covenant. Wars are breaking out. The world's in chaos. Here comes this fourth horseman on the scene, mm-hmm. who has authority in some translations over a quarter of the earth. Now, what a lot of your Bible expositors will say, well, that means a quarter of the earth is being killed at that time. Okay. And that's not what's being said. It said that this entity is given authority over a quarter of the earth to kill mankind. So we're not told how many people they're killing. We're told that they have authority over a geography of maybe a quarter of the earth or a quarter of the population to execute a campaign that is going to bring some kind of stability out of what's going on in the world and the chaos. And so we want to compare that to, in Revelation chapter 9, it talks about with the sixth trumpet, that 4 angels are going to be loosed and a third of mankind will be killed. It clearly says a third of mankind will be killed, but that's not what's being said here. That's a different event. This is said It's not saying a quarter of mankind will be killed. It's saying this entity will have authority over a quarter. Now, that's a major epiphany, Gary, when you look at that.
The word kill or assassinate or murder or in any way, shape, or form is absent from that verse. That's a great point, because usually people say, well, a fourth of the population of the world dies.
Yeah, and that's not what's being said. So now what we find as we unveil these seals a little further is the fifth seal. And the fifth seal, what we find is, okay, with the fourth horseman, they've got control over a quarter of the earth, and they're killing. And it talks about different manners that they're killing, with the sword and with hunger and stuff like that. But what they're doing is the dissenters, the people, the dissidents of whatever's trying to be executed at that point in time, are going to be killed. And we find out who some of those dissenters are in the fifth seal, and it's the fifth seal saints, Gary. And they ask a very interesting question, and the Lord responds in a very telling fashion. If you want to read those verses, I'd like to interpret those.
I could read verses 9 and 10 of Revelation chapter 6. And when he had opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. Under the altar, souls slain for the testimony of God. Just get that in your mind. Next verse says, and they cried with a loud voice, saying, how long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? Who are these people? What do they signify to us?
Okay, well, what's going on there is, here's a group of people, after the death in Hades is executing with that authority over a quarter of the earth, they're the victims of that. They're among the victims. And this is a discriminate killing of believers. These are people who have a testimony in the Word of God and their faith. They're being martyred, and they're slain, it says. And they're asking a very interesting question. They're saying, how long, O Lord, until you will avenge our blood? I mean, this is a bad situation that's going on, and they're wondering, how much longer is this going to happen? And you and I talked about this in the pre-show. Gary,
sure.
If we were, let's just assume there was no pre-trib rapture, and of course we're saying there is, but let's just assume we see the confirmation of the false covenant in Daniel 9:27. You and I are going to go, wow, there's 7-year covenant there. If we were all of a sudden killed a year into that, we wouldn't be asking the Lord, how long, O Lord? We know there's 6 years left, because 1 year's gone out of that 7.
That's true.
So we have a group of people here who don't know how long, and the reason I believe they don't know how long is because the confirmation of the false covenant has not been confirmed yet, and the tribulation has not begun yet. The raptures happened in Revelation 4 and 5, but now these guys find themselves in the post-rapture. I call it the post-rapture. It happens after the rapture. Pre-trib, it happens before the tribulation period. They find themselves in the post-rapture, pre-trib gap period, and they don't know how much longer death and Hades is going to be mowing these people down. And what the Lord says to them is very telling, if you want to read the next verses.
Well, we have following that verse, and white robes were given unto every one of them, and it was said unto them that they should rest yet for a little season. In other words, just be calm, be quiet, and wait just a little while, until their fellow servants also and their brethren that should be killed as they were should be fulfilled. That's really, that says a mouthful.
Well, what you have there is, first of all, they are slain for their faith, and they're saved, and that's what the white robe represents there. So a white robe was given to them. But then he said, you need to be patient, because there's 3 other groups of people, and he lists them, who are going to be martyred. And what he's saying there is, you're martyred. You don't know how long, because the tribulation hasn't started yet. Your fellow servants who will be killed like you will, and their brethren. So there's a third group. You got 3 distinct groups. And what I'm going to point out and postulate is that the first group is those that die in the gap, post-rapture, pre-trib gap. They don't know how long. They're killed by, I believe that's going to be the harlot of Revelation 17:16, who's drunk with the blood of the saints and the martyrs of Jesus. And I'm going to put a face on who I believe that harlot is in the book. Then the harlot is also killing people who believe in Christ into the first half of the tribulation period.
Yeah.
So now that's their servants. In other words, you are the fifth seal saints, and your servants are going to be killed. And then ultimately the harlot, after she's overextended her usefulness, is desolated at the command of the Antichrist with the 10 kings in Revelation 17:16. And then the Antichrist comes in the middle part of the tribulation, and he puts his Mark of the Beast campaign in motion. And if you don't take the Mark of the Beast, you will be killed for that. So that would be their brethren. So the fifth seal saints are in the gap. They die in the gap. They don't know how much longer till the tribulation comes. The confirmation has not happened of the covenant. The first half, their servants are in the first half, and their brethren, they're all killed for their faith. The first two groups by the harlot, the last group, their brethren, by the Antichrist, because they don't take the Mark of the Beast. I believe that's what Christ is saying there. And so that's his answer to them.
Now, I can hear a lot of people saying right now, oh, there's this long period of time between the rapture and the beginning of the tribulation. How long? How long is it? Just as the saints are saying, how long, O Lord?
Yeah, and what I try to address in Apocalypse Road is how long and what is in that gap. Again, the concept of a gap, even you've been writing about this at various stages and things like that, and you're sort of a pioneer of this gap, and I appreciate your writings on that. A lot of the other Bible prophecy teachers are coming along and saying, hey, yeah, there's going to be a gap because we understand it's not the rapture, it's the confirmation of the false covenant. But they've not looked into how long or what fits in it. And what my concern is that this gap may be a lot longer than people think. It could be a number of years. And there are people who could be alive with us today, right now, because I believe we're in the final generation, and many people in our families and our friends or whatever who are not getting it about the gospel and accepting Christ, they will be left behind and they will be thrust into this gap. And I believe that Bible prophecies are available for them to understand. This is what you should be on the lookout for. Most people are going to, if they're listening to their mom and dad talking about a rapture and then a tribulation, the first thing they're going to think about is, oh, here comes the tribulation. I've been left behind. I better watch out for the Antichrist. No, not necessarily so. There's a harlot that comes on the scene first in Revelation 17. The harlot rides the beast, the Antichrist. He carries her to the elevated stature she gets. And then ultimately he will desolate her when she's no longer useful. I'm trying to let them know there are certain things you need to prepare for now if you get left behind. Now, what we also want to do, and that's why this book is important, is we want to say to you who are concerned about someone who might get left behind, this book will be available to you to prepare them to receive Christ now in the church age so they don't have to go through those perils that are coming. And those perils are enormous. And we're not even talking about the perils of the tribulation, the bowl judgments and the trumpet judgments. We're talking about the perils that happen after the rapture, before the tribulation. It's an incredible time to be, you don't want to miss the rapture.
Now, I've turned to 2 Thessalonians because you include that as well. And if you read 2 Thessalonians, it appears that those left behind immediately are subverted by the Antichrist with no time gap whatsoever. And how do you answer that?
Well, basically the way I look at 2 Thessalonians, and the people who teach there is no second chance at salvation once you've heard the gospel, their cornerstone verses they've interpreted that in 2 Thessalonians. And I have a whole large section in the book talking about, yes, you have a second chance. I voice their arguments, and I voice the 7 reasons why I disagree with those, and acknowledge why there is a second chance. But basically what I interpret there is that what's being said there is that everybody who gets left behind at this point in time, when lawlessness now is going to be unleashed with all lying signs and wonders with Satan and that sort of thing, they are perishing. And they did not receive the gospel at that time, and that's why they're all in with that whole group of people who get left behind. Okay. Now, what happens at that point is that at some point, the mark of the beast is going to be implemented, which is the point of no return. Once they choose that, and the lie, the deception that Satan's perpetrating, takes some time. It's a process. It doesn't happen at the second of the rapture. The restraint is removed at that time, but now he's going to put his lie into place. It's already going to be in motion. It's going to take time. And then ultimately there's going to be a mark of the beast, and anybody who takes that mark of the beast now experiences the wrath of God. But between the rapture and that time, you've got a gap. You've got a first half of the tribulation, and then you got that. That could be a number of years. So to think that it's referring to the people who heard the gospel and just got left behind, that they need to go immediately go and stand behind in the line for the mark of the beast, is wrong. That's not how that should be interpreted. So the text does not state that. The text puts it in the context of the people left behind that have to face the mark of the beast.
And so the rapture really is, as you suggest, an evangelistic event. In other words, we shouldn't look at the rapture as the end of all hope for those left behind, but rather as the beginning of like a new window opening with God's grace.
Absolutely. You know, we just talked about the fifth seal saints, their servants and their brethren. So we know a lot of people are getting saved after the rapture. And it's, in my estimation, it's preposterous to think that all those people who get saved never heard the gospel before the rapture. Look at the 144,000 witnesses. Those are Jewish witnesses who more than likely have heard the gospel. They could be the tour bus drivers in Israel that know more about the New Testament than their Christian travelers.
How true.
So, I mean, and again, like I said, it only takes one person to drop to their knees after the rapture out of the untold millions that are left behind that had heard the gospel to nullify that whole no second chance
Yeah, you mentioned
teaching.
those tour bus drivers that know so much about the New Testament, and all I'm thinking of is the 144,000 of the 12 tribes of Israel.
That's right, in Revelation 7.
Who really actually are ready. When everything begins to change, they're more ready than even they thought they would be to get out and preach the gospel.
Yeah, and I want to say one last thing too. The reason there's some time in this gap is Israel is signing a covenant because they're trying to avoid something that's happening on the earth. Isaiah 28 tells us there's some overflowing scourge that's sweeping through the earth that is against Israel's national interests at that time. That has to be in existence. That has to be established. And so I define what that is. And then that's when they say we need to make a covenant to protect ourselves from that.
Now, I'd like to talk about the book. It started with a Revelation Road some years ago. It's culminating with Apocalypse Road, and in which Bill has his latest ideas, in which he goes out there and sort of challenges our classical, conventional thinking. I can offer you the Apocalypse Road package, by the way, which includes this book, Bill's previous book, Revelation Road, and 2 DVDs from our 2016 Rocky Mountain Prophecy Conference. Bill spoke there, and we have his presentations on DVDs. The Apocalypse Road package, that's the book, Apocalypse Road, plus Revelation Road, and the 2 conference DVDs, yours for just $34.95. And then let me say something else here about the Bill Salus DVD collection. These 4 DVDs really track Bill's thinking over a number of years. And just looking back through these, you have America and the coming Mideast wars. You have Psalm 83, the missing prophecies revealed. You have the Now Prophecies. And you remember not too long ago, Bill was talking about the prophecies he calls the Now Prophecies as opposed to the Next Prophecies. Well, all of this you can get from our Prophecy Watcher online bookstore. Go there, scroll down to Bill's name, and you'll find these offers. We've got it all for you here. Bill, you are prolific as an author, I must say.
Well, Gary, we're talking about some very powerful prophetic events, trying to order them chronologically, and we're just trying to lay them out there and give people hope and preparation for the powerful days in which we live. And you know, dear viewers, your world is crazy right now. You're seeing these things converge. So it's important to understand what the Lord had to say about these things through the prophets and through Christ and through the apostles, and that's what we're doing here.
The blessed hope is much more blessed than we think. It extends on into what has been called the never, never land of the apocalypse. There is grace even after the rapture. What a concept, Bill. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Gary.
I'm Gary Stearman. We're watching. You keep watching too. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.